1, Introduction to Ecosystems. So in talking about ecosystems, we're going to explain how the availability of resources influences species interactions. So to accomplish this, we're going to describe the types of relationships between species and also describe how species can exist together in the same ecosystem. So let's start by talking about predators and prey. So we know that predators are the organisms which eat other organisms, and we call those the prey. So here we've got two lions. They are predators, and they are eating the prey. We've got our bird over here, and his fish is his prey. So this is one way in which organisms, different species within an ecosystem can interact. It isn't always like this, though. We also have what's called symbiosis. So symbiosis is a close and long-term interaction. So this is not just I'm hungry and I'm going to eat you, or you're hungry and I'm going to run for my life. It's a long-term interaction between two species in an ecosystem. So we break this down into generally three different types: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. So we'll start with mutualism. And if you break this down, you see the word mutual. So it's when both species benefit. So it's a positive relationship. A great example of this is butterflies and flowers. The butterfly gets its pollen and nectar, and the plant gets its pollen spread on so it can pass its genes to the next generation. We move to commensalism. This is where one species benefits and the other isn't harmed. It probably doesn't even know this relationship is going on. So, for example, we have barnacles on a whale. The barnacles get to travel, they get to be exposed to water, which may have food, and the whale doesn't really notice. It's got some hitchhikers. So I put the two lines because nobody's getting harmed, just nothing is happening for one of the species. And this is in contrast to parasitism, which if you've got any pets, you may be familiar with this. And this is where one species benefits and the other is harmed. This is a positive-negative relationship. Great example, we're in Connecticut, so we've got ticks. They are a parasite, they benefit, sucking our blood. Not great for us. So this brings me to another type of relationship, competition. So we can break competition down into two different types. Intraspecific, intra meaning within the same species, and interspecific, which would be between different species. So we've got competition amongst different elephants. So this doesn't necessarily mean fighting. Competition could be for any type of resource. And then interspecific is all those animals at the watering hole are competing for the same limited resource. So these limited resources can include food, space, it could include mates, it could include water like we see at the watering hole. It's not specifically meaning I'm going to fight you for mates. It could be all different kinds of things, anything that's limited in that specific environment. So how can all of these different species, all those species at the watering hole, how do they all survive in the same area? To understand this concept, we're going to take a look at these 4 different species of bees, which exist all in the same area. So it's not great for these species if they're all competing for the same limited resource, because eventually somebody's not going to exist anymore. You cannot continue indefinitely competing for these resources. So there has to be ways to get around this. So they can handle this in a couple different ways. So they can do what's called resource partitioning. So they may use the same flowers, but they may use them at different times, in different places, access them in different ways. And what's great about resource partitioning is it can reduce the negative impact that competition has on survival. The whole goal is to survive, so if you're constantly competing, it's not great to your overall goal. So I had that image of the giraffe a minute ago. Giraffes have a lot of competition for the limited resources in the savanna, and they have developed ways to eat high above, whereas there's other species such as zebras, which are only going to get the lower branches, and they're eating the same thing but in different ways and at different places on the same plant. So let's look at how these bees went through resource partitioning. So some of these bees developed different length proboscises, so they were getting different parts of the flower, and others were feeding on similar flowers but at different altitudes, so they resource partitioned through space. What's great about resource partitioning is it reduces that negative impact on survival, and promotes biodiversity. So if species can find different ways to manage their limited resources, that promotes greater diversity and greater amounts of species in the same area. So, to summarize, our goal was to explain how the availability of resources influences species interactions. So we learned today that predators eat prey, competition results when there is limited resources, and resource partitioning allows species to coexist. And different types of symbioses, we've got mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism.